Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Naruto Got Harem in Jujutsu Kaisen. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A promise cannot be erased. Words spoken from one soul to another hold meaning, even if they fade. I kept each and every one of my promises. I never broke them, not a single one. For the longest time, I thought there was honor in that. Dignity, promises, oaths, vows, all pretty window dressing for the same thing. When you give someone your word, you damn well keep it, come hell or high water. Even if something extraordinary happens to stop you, you pick yourself up and try again. But promises didn't mean anything to the Otsutsuki. They only cared about one thing, and they got it. I hate them. I truly hate them. I hate them. I gave up everything to beat them. I kept my word and it wasn't enough, Kurama, and I sacrificed everything we had, our body, our chakra, our very souls, but it wasn't enough. The power we achieved was fleeting. Brief and bright, it burned out before we could achieve victory. The moment it did, we died. Both of us. Together. I was hated. I kept hating in return. Hell, I died with so many regrets choking me, I couldn't even think straight. Maybe that had something to do with it. Hate, guilt, regret. To this day, I don't understand it. I remember my heart being crushed. That awful tearing sensation as Otsutsuki bastard tore it out, crushed it in his fist, threw it down, and moved on to my family. There was nothing I could do. I promised I would protect everyone ... but I couldn't. I know I died. I looked down at my broken, brutalized body. My sons died. My wife died. My daughter died. And then, quite suddenly, I was alive. I don't know how to explain it. I was so angry at the time. And that horned bastard looked so surprised, so I killed him. Killed them all. But I didn't stop there. I tracked down each and every last one of Otsutsuki on this miserable planet. When more came from the stars, I killed them, too. I kept killing and killing and killing until there was nothing left to kill. Our battle ravaged the world, but they got their wish. The continent is a barren, shattered husk, the survivors scattered to the winds. It'll take hundreds of years to recover, assuming it ever does. Yet I did what I set out to do. Keep your word. Honor your promises. Never go break your vows. I promised I would eradicate every Otsutsuki from this world. And I did. But at what cost? Was it too much? Did I go too far? It's so quiet here without you, Kurama. I can't stand it. I just can't. My memory is fading. I'm less and less like myself every day. I can't live like this, but I can't die. What am I supposed to do now? There's nothing left for me here. I'm not human anymore. Most people can't even see me at all. But these instincts remain, gnawing at me. Who am I? I don't know sometimes. I have to remember. I gotta remember. How do I? It's like an itch in the back of my brain. Quiet now, but I can feel it still there. I'm losing myself to it, and not just me, but my sense of self. I am neither Naruto nor Kurama. But I am I am dead. I died. I have the memories of both, the body of neither. Am I stuck like this? I've decided. I'll seal myself away. Bury myself deep and sleep. Better to swim in a sea of dreams than sit atop a mountain of corpses. Maybe I'll find some solace there. You can't break a promise in your dreams, right? After all, it doesn't count if you're asleep. Don't wake me up. Please, let me sleep. Never forget. I am still here. Never forget. I kept my promise. Never forget. I am Naruto Uzumaki. Must never forget that. Mahito broke his binding vow. In short, he did not keep his promise. His vow to Kakashi Muta had been shattered. Really, he said he would heal him, and he had. But he hadn't said he would heal his everything, not perfectly, not all. Surely screwing up his lungs accidentally and letting him choke on his own blood didn't count, right? Awake. Why am I awake? I didn't want to wake up. I've slept for so long now. I wanted to keep sleeping. Dreaming is easier. I kept my promise. I said I wouldn't wake while the world didn't need me. I threw myself into the river and buried myself beneath the bank to make sure no one would find me. There's no one down here. Can't I just go back to sleep? No, I can't, so why? Oh, I see. Above me. It's their fault. That guy woke me up. He broke his vow. Kenjaku wasn't prone to anger. It was a part of his innate nature, you see. He considered himself a calculating soul, given to fits of emotion and excitement, yes, but seldom anger. Never anger. Not in all the years he'd been alive. Until now. Now his smile was nowhere to be seen. Kakashi Muta writhed on the ground at their feet, struggling for breath, wasted and gasping for air with his half-formed lungs. Mahito lay sprawled beside him, not for any lack of breathing on his part, but rather the vicious backhand that had delivered him there a moment before. Under any other circumstance, he might have taken pleasure in his horrified expression. But now, you little fool. He'd told Mahito not to break the vow, not once, not twice, but thrice, even going so far as to command him. Heal the boy in exchange for spying on his fellow sorcerers, and then kill him to prevent him from turning around and doing the same to them. Simple, really. But the vicious little idiot was a child at heart and so difficult to control. The disaster curses had their purposes, their uses, yes, but this twit was pivotal for his future plans, and he couldn't afford use curse manipulation to absorb him just yet. Instead, he deliberately disobeyed him, seeking to flaunt the rules of the vow. There was no way of knowing what might happen now. Even he couldn't predict what would transpire. There was a reason you didn't break a binding vow with someone else, in part because you had no idea what might happen. It was one thing to end a pact with oneself. In that instance, one only lost the inherent benefit they'd gained. But when you violated a promise, a sworn pact between yourself and another cursed user, who knew what might transpire, all hell could break loose. And it might. The symptoms of breaking a binding vow were many and myriad. One might suffer immense damage to their physical body, or worse, find their cursed energy halved, and in doing so have their innate technique stripped away. Likewise, a series of unfortunate events might occur as the world itself lashed out at them for breaking their word. He'd seen so many different instances of violated vows in his heyday. Some dropped dead on the spot, others lived to tell the tale. Finish healing him, he all but barked the words. "No, it's fine, isn't it?" Mahito flounced to his feet. "He's going to die anyway." Fool of a boy, was he trying to tempt fate? Kenjaku held his breath and prayed. Nothing happened. He dared to hope. And then the world screamed. That was the only sound he could equate with the utter roar that rattled everything around them. It came from above, below, all around them, from the very earth itself. His gaze snapped downward just in time to see the stone crack and shatter underfoot, and then the ground rattled, shook, burst. Something came through. At a glance, the newcomer almost looked human, but only at a glance. Kenjaku felt he could be forgiven for that mistake. Perhaps humanoid was the better description. His hair was a bedraggled blonde mess, his black and orange clothes a messy tatter, clad in clods of dirt. Fitting, given he'd clearly clawed his way out of a tomb. Yet for all his rough appearance, his eyes were alive. They were sharp and red, marred by myriad black marks flowing around his face and into his glowing golden hair. Clad in some sort of strange red cloak, he stood tall. 4 tails flowed atop the collar, 5 upon the bottom. No, not a cloak. He realized it was alive. He could see it writhing and twisting despite the lack of wind, almost shimmering, really. The cursed energy hit a second later. It was the air, wind itself, howling at them, threatening to drag the very air from their lungs if they so much as twitched. Kenjaku almost found himself almost grinning despite the circumstances. This was not a human. This was not a jujutsu sorcerer. This was an ancient cursed spirit. It had been so long since he'd last seen one he'd thought them extinct. Could it be from that era? No. Its cursed energy was even older. Had someone sealed it away? No. Judging by its hale and healthy state, he would wager it had been a voluntary imprisonment. People did that sometimes when they were reborn as curses. The good ones, those scant few who retained their sense of self, often tried to hide away so as not to harm their loved ones. Which made him wonder if this was one of those. A flicker and he was past them. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Just now, he hadn't seen a thing. When did he move? The nameless blonde knelt before Kakichi Muta and laid a hand on his back. "You kept your promise." His voice was rough, hoarse even from lack of use. "Good boy. You get to live." His hand pulsed with eerie red light and the boy coughed, sucking in a ragged breath. The blonde patted his shoulders once, as a brother might their younger sibling. "Message," the boy rasped. "Satoru Gojo going to seal him." A slow blink was his reward. "What's a Satoru Gojo?" "To ch." Mahito made a noise and reached for him. "Don't go blabbing." The boy vanished. Kenjaku frowned thoughtfully. Another trick. He'd seen a hint of movement that time, but it had been almost too quick for him to comprehend. The blonde curse had slapped a hand against the boy's back. He'd seen a brief flash of light, then nothing. The curse technique, perhaps. "Hey, don't go spiriting him now," Mahito whined, distracting him. "We're just going to kill him again." This time, the curse didn't so much flicker as he did blur. Between one blink and another, he stood, took one step forward, then one step, and quite suddenly, he snapped into existence before Mahito. He leaned down and glared at him, eyes wide. "Was it you?" Ah, the human cursed spirit balked. "You." Those blank red eyes seemed to stare into the very depths of his soul. "Did you break your vow, your promise?" "Well, I wouldn't exactly say that." Kenjaku tensed. "Idiot." A hand closed around Mahito's throat at speed and whipped him around him into the nearest wall with such force that the stone cracked against his back. "Hey, now we're both curses. Let's get along, Gek," he choked, voice cutting off with a squawk as a clawed thumb dug into his larynx. "Not so rough, you trying to kill me." He was, Kenjaku realized. Killer intent bloomed in the air, all focused firmly upon him. For some reason, this particular curse took promises seriously. A remnant of his time as a human, perhaps he was almost tempted to intervene but thought better of it for now. Mahito hadn't simply upset him, he'd disappointed him. For that, he deserved to suffer a little. "It was you," the blonde rasped. "You're the one who woke me up. You look human, but you're not, or you're like me, but worse, you delight in what you are. And what's wrong with that?" It was the wrong thing to say and he knew it. The blonde's crimson cloak bloomed tenfold. "Die. Yeah, not happening." Mahito looped an arm down and touched the blonde's chest. Idle transfiguration. What happened next was strange indeed. Kenjaku felt the technique take effect, watched the blonde's flesh bubble in response to settle back down a moment later as his skin mended and healed. He'd done something just now, and it made him proper curious. Not nullification per se, but whatever it was, it rendered Mahito's technique moot. That shouldn't be possible. Unless, did he regenerate his soul as well as his body? Mahito made a disbelieving noise. "Seriously, what are?" A snarling sphere smashed through his torso and sent him flying outside. Kenjaku grinned. He'd seen that attack just now, such a masterful work of art. An attack that destroys at the cellular level, such power. He wanted it, he had to have it. No, he would have it. Grinning ear to ear, he raised his right hand and focused his will upon the curse manipulation. The ancient curse spirit rounded on him with a scowl. And just like that, Kenjaku found himself airborne. Am I missing something? I didn't even see him hit me. Fascinating. His curiosity was piqued, even more so when the blonde curse didn't pursue. He alighted outside, perching upon the very dam he'd been blasted out of. This one didn't seem stronger than Sukuna, but then again, he'd only just awoken after what must have been centuries of hibernation. He longed to fight and acquire Himno. Perhaps it was best to retreat for now and rest, but he couldn't do that, could he? They had 10 days until Shibuya after all, and it wouldn't for Muta to reveal their plan ahead of time. Wait, he'd left Mahito down there, hadn't he? Losing him would be convenient. A massive explosion answered. Oh dear, but it sounded like he was in pain. Guido a little help. And afraid, too. Quite terrified, really. But fear was an excellent catalyst for growth, he found. He could have leapt to his defense. But he didn't have the best opinion of Mahito in this moment, and so he chose to watch and wait. Below him the brawl unfolded. Mahito lunged, lashing out with a bladed arm, only for the blonde to tilt his head, let it rush by, and slam an open palm into his chest. Red light rushed in through his palm, striking his soul. The younger curse choked and stumbled back, throwing a half-hearted punch as he went for distance. The blonde caught it and his head snapped up, teeth clenched, hair swaying in a sudden breeze that hadn't existed only a moment prior. At this range he couldn't hear what was said between them, or if anything was said at all. But he did hear and see what followed. Mahito's right arm gave way with a sickening crunch, buckling in 3 separate places, wrist, elbow, and shoulder. Dislocated, it slumped down at his side, useless for the moment. The blonde didn't give him time to heal or reshape his soul to accommodate for the sudden injury. He waded in like a boxer and barreled a fist into Mahito's face, sternum, lungs, liver, wailing on him relentlessly, battering him every which way. Kenjaku winced despite himself. My, if he keeps pushing him like this, then. A panic shriek filled the night. The main expansion. He settled the fist against his chin. There it is, crossing both legs beneath him. He settled into weight. Mahito laughed. How could he not? This was such wonderful inspiration. Because you see, this was death destruction incarnate, not since Sukuna himself had he experienced sheer fear like this. Such primordial terror of this blondie was, he seemed hellbent on trying to kill him. There was no witty banter here, no playful exchange of remarks, only the furious, relentless assault that came with 2 curses trying to curse one another. It wasn't quite as fun as tormenting and adoring Yuji, but beggars couldn't be choosers, he supposed. It seemed almost a shame to kill him. But he had him now. Game over. Idle transfiguration hadn't quite worked before, but now it would. His technique was stronger here, wouldn't miss here, and there was nowhere for Blondie to run. He had him, quite literally, in the palm of his hand. Even if he tried to lung at him, he still wouldn't be fast enough. He had no ranged attacks, no way to reach him from way over there. A smirk stretched across his marred face. It's been fun, pal, but you're done. Idle transfiguration. The blonde brought both hands up, fingers splayed, red cloak lashing at the air. Black light swelled before Mahito's vision, and with it came a word. By Judama. Mahito didn't even have time to scream before everything burned. The blast was fast and half-formed, no larger than a person, a testament to its owner's quick reflexes. He'd sensed the inherent danger of his domain and reacted instantly. Had it been fully formed, he would have perished on the spot. But it wasn't, and as such, death was not instant. Perhaps it would have been preferable it were, because it hurt like hell. He'd split himself at the last moment, but even then his soul shrieked as he hurtled away. His double disintegrated outright, eradicated before it could even contemplate a counterattack. He needed time to recover. His arms sprouted wings to fly away, was still flying in fact when a hand closed around the back of his head and smashed him into the ground. Stars burst before his vision, but his foe wasn't done. Even as he tried to wriggle free now, even as he thought to grab at the hand holding his face together, the berserk blonde smashed him down again. What is this? What is he? A snarl was his only answer before the blonde took off running. He barreled forward, dragging him along the ground, carving a furrow in the earth as he went. If it weren't for his own innate strength, his face would have been sheared clean off within the first 10 seconds. Even then it hurt. When it became clear that wouldn't kill him, Blondie threw him upright and kicked him away. Stunned, he didn't even think of dodging and went limp instead. In a bitter twist of irony that saved Mahito's life, bark and sap burst before his back, then he was through, leaving him with a serious case of road rash across the whole of his face. The pain was humiliating, the experience degrading in a way no self-respecting curse would wish upon their worst enemy. But the brief haze meant his foe couldn't see him. It gave him time to breathe, marshal the tattered threads of his thoughts. Focus. There had to be a way out of this. Surely he wasn't going to die here to some mindless curse. That's right. It's me he's after, not Guido. He's fighting mad, not smart. Strategy had gone flying out the window, which meant he could win, but he had to be careful. A few more hits like that might actually kill him. Him be killed, not happening. He was meant for greater things than this. No curse fresh out of a dirt nap was going to put him down. Gathering himself up with a groan, he righted his aching body and came up with the bare bones of a plan. Fight smarter, not harder. That was the way. This guy isn't Satoru Gojo. He's not invincible. I just have to find his weakness. He parted his hands with a grin. Don't let him get close. Use a more inspired shape, one honed for murder, maybe use some transfigured humans, split yourself again. Movement behind him. Mahito whirled in a panic, arm forming flail. Nothing was there. Oh, come on, it's just my own shadow. The blonde leaped out of that shadow and barreled into him. Clawed finger clashed his chest open, slashing at his soul with it. Are you kidding me? He howled furiously as they went down in a tangle of arms and legs. Who taught you that? Blondie didn't speak. There were no words from him, only silent fury, seething ire, quiet rage. Clenched knuckles barreled down into his face, forcing him to block, the sheer heat of his blows blackening his limbs. Blondie didn't stop. He just kept swinging, and with each punches he felt his soul shriek in pain. Those fists of his were really starting to hurt. In a panic he bucked and kicked out with both feet, blasting the blonde backward. The moment he was free he slithered away, only to find the whiskered warrior righting himself once more. He wasn't getting anywhere like this. An idea dawned. Well, nothing ventured. A grin split Mahito's face. You don't like to talk, do you? The blonde twitched. Aha, finally a reaction in that stony facade. There we go. He clapped his hands with a merry grin. Why so serious with a face like that? I bet you didn't have any friends when you were alive. A muscle jumped in Blondie's jaw. Now they were getting somewhere. Did I touch a nerve? He crooned, delighted by his reaction as much as the respite. Poor thing, what an awful life you must have led. His nostrils flared ever so slightly, and his shoulders twitched. Just a little bit more, now. Oh, I know that look. Was someone counting on you? Did you let them down? The twitch became a spasm. Don't tell me, did you lose your family, a wife, maybe? The ominous silence that followed was all the answer he needed. One more nudge and he'd go flying off the handle. Mahito just knew it. Was it your children? Blondie threw his head back and roared at the sky, his voice echoing outward in a singular cry. He screamed and howled and raged against the heavens until the earth shook and the skies darkened, until the clouds rolled in to blot out the moon. Mahito saw his chance and lunged. Let him holler his lungs out for all he cared. His guard was down, he was wide open, and his open palm struck a massive surge of cursed energy and disintegrated outright. Mahito balked at his ruined limb. Then came the pain. It was the worst feeling he'd ever felt, like countless fire ants marching under his sin, biting. And it was absolutely everywhere. Agony raced up his arm and into the nub of his elbow, followed by his shoulder, shooting into his chest. A scream tore out of him as he clawed at himself. Surging his cursed energy helped, if only just. A shadow fell over him. I've made a terrible mistake. His newfound contrition didn't save him from the absolute pummeling that followed. Those scarred fists swept in for him, and they swept hard. Left, right, center, up, down, and every cardinal direction in between. He had no chance to shape his soul, much less his thoughts. It was only a particularly powerful punch that saved him, sending him tumbling away. Righting himself, he reshaped his soul to heal. Geez, he's mad. What got into him? Temper much. Blondie's head swung back down to snarl at him, teeth clenched. Scarlet sparks skittered around him as he stalked forward, his already glowing hair jagged and standing on end. The air grew thick around him, forming the telltale shape of a golden fox's snarling head over those hunched shoulders. For an awful moment it almost seemed alive, sneering at him like some mad god of war. Surely not. He was imagining things. Foe. That was all it took. A single word and his knees buckled, betraying him in an instant. Was he kneeling to him? How? A kick caught his chin and sent him sprawling into the muck. You want to talk? Blondie walked after him, crimson cloak and 9 terrible tails swaying in the wind. Fine, we can talk. His voice was eerily calm, despite the harsh tears glimmering in his eyes. My voice will be the last thing you hear. Mahito lunged at him. If he could just touch his face. The blonde scoffed, swayed aside, and repaid him in kind. An open palm smack cracked across Mahito's visage, sending an eye and 3 teeth whistling through the air besides. It doesn't matter so long as he doesn't hit my soul black. You're just like them, aren't you? A fresh kick shattered his body, driving a lance of scarlet energy into his chest. Those damned horned bastards. You say one thing and do another, you take and take and take. He grabbed him by the face and clawed at him furiously, sharp teeth flashing in fury. All with that vapid smile of yours. No more. I'll wipe your kind off the face of the earth. No. He stomped a barefoot and the earth shattered for miles around, sending him tumbling into a crevasse. The reprieve was brief. Blondie barreled in after him and stomped him down, wedging him against the dirt in the dark. Killing you isn't good enough. He leaned forward, eyes ablaze. I'll tear that smile off your face, feed at you, and eat you. I'll take that twisted soul and devour it. Everything you are, everything you were, everything you'll ever be. You won't even be a memory when I'm through with you. Mahito tried to grab at him, only for Blondie to stomp on his hands. Cheeky little. Well, where are your words now? He growled down at him. Go on, laugh, tell your jokes, play your games. So this was what anger felt like. He didn't enjoy it. You're just a lowly curse like me. Don't you dare look down on. Wind lashed out, lopping his head from his shoulders. He detached it at the last second, but the pain persisted, rendering his words a warbling whine as he bounced away. I felt that in my soul. It was all I could do to regenerate. Boot. A kick collided with his skull and sent him rocketed out the crevasse. His head struck the ground, bounced once, and grew himself a new body. Even then it took far more curse energy than he would have liked. He felt his already dwindling reserves plummet tenfold. Vomiting up more transfigured humans didn't do him any good. They outright melted in his hands, like so much morning dew. Oi, Guido, he cried into the night. A little help. The knight rendered him no aid. Where are you looking? A hand closed around the back of his head and tossed him away. The blonde cur stalked forward after him, his red aura forming the grisly guise of a fox once more. This was different than Sukuna. The king of curses was an apathetic monster who enjoyed tormenting all those beneath him, but he didn't particularly care about anyone. He was above it all, doing as he pleased, when he pleased, how he pleased. He would kill you if you bothered him, but beyond that he just didn't care. Not so Naruto. This thing wanted him dead. Nothing more, nothing less. And he wouldn't stop until he was. Not bad. He righted himself with a confidence he no longer felt. You're full of surprises, aren't you? But I've still got a few of my own to tell. His words warped into a squeal of pure agony as the blonde flickered into existence before him, tore his arm off, grabbed him by the face again, and drilled him into the dirt once more. Blood bloomed in the air. Oh, confidence began to wane. This isn't going to end well, was it? It was not. Then again, that might have been his arm talking as Blondie beat him over the head with it and smashed his face in. He swept a hand down, conjuring an eerie rod of black iron, and stabbed it into his gut. Mahito blanched despite himself. Whatever it was, it froze him, paralyzed him. He couldn't muster up any cursed energy, let alone use his technique. And then he heard it. A keening whine filled the air and his good eye rolled up in search of the answer. He found the source clutched tight in the blonde's hands, a keening, spiraling sphere growing larger with each passing second. The wind rose with it, loud, louder, loudest. His spirit sank at the sight of it. The damn thing was already larger than his head, his entire body now, and it was still growing. No, there was nothing he could do. Not now. He couldn't die here, right? Not like this. He'd been looking forward to Shibuya. It was supposed to be so much fun. I don't even know his name. I'm not supposed to. A bare foot stamped down on his skull, holding him fast. Baleful red orbs gazed down at them, filled with fire, burning with hate. A wise man once said eyes are the windows to the soul. Indeed they were. And what Mahito saw there terrified him. His eyes. It was those damn eyes. There was no mercy in them. No hesitation. In his hands, the sphere had now grown to titanic proportions. He could no longer see anything past it, such was its size and its light. The sheer force of it was already starting to cut into the blonde's arm, but that didn't even seem to bother him. He just held it there, staring at him. Something broke in Mahito in that moment. Wait, I'm sorry. His voice rose in a childish wail. You'll have to forgive me. I will not forgive. Red orbs met his. Nor will I be forgiven. Horror dawned in all its entirety. His eyes bulged. Duo. Rasenshuriken. Let there be light. The pain that followed went beyond description. It overloaded Mahito's senses even as it ripped him apart at the cellular level. Blacking out was a merciful. He didn't have to feel the pain, but the reprieve proved brief and the agony would not be denied. He came to after what felt like an eternity and found his body was devastated, his legs blown clear off, with most of his upper and lower torso besides. All that remained was a broken, twisted body bearing the ruined nub of a left arm. But at least the blonde was gone. His mangled face twisted in an agonized smile. Hey, still alive, Blondie. Something slammed into his chest. He looked up to find the object of his ire back with a vengeance, one hand sheathed in the melted remains of his chest. My name, he rasped, clenching his fist within him, is Naruto. Mahito felt something be tugged free. It wasn't his heart. Couldn't be. What was that? Was that his soul? It looked so small, smaller than he'd thought it could be. His vision was beginning to dim around the edges. Everything was growing dark. So very dark. Even then, he still saw the moment the blonde cursed Naruto lifted his soul up, opened his mouth and tossed the morsel into his mouth. Then he bit down. Mahito cried out, to no avail. He couldn't see it proper, but he felt the moment those teeth came crashing down on his very being. A stabbing pain filled his heart, followed by a sudden start. His world went white and he flopped down in the dirt. But even then, death wasn't instant. Not for him. He could see them staring at him now. All of them. Everyone he'd ever killed. Everyone he'd ever tormented. Everyone he'd ever trampled upon. They were all there standing there, all staring at him with their solemn faces. Even Sukuna's vessel was there somehow, which didn't make a lick of sense because he knew the bastard was alive and kicking. He looked happy, not at all the traumatized wreck he should have been. Itadori Yuji, damn it, I was supposed to break him. It was gonna be so much fun. A bare foot stomped down on Mahito's skull and he knew no more. His life was snuffed out, like a candle in the wind. Unfortunate. Kenjaku heaved a small, disappointed sigh as he descended the dam. By the time he'd realized what the blonde curse intended, it was too late. The blonde curse Naruto was too quick for him. He glimpsed that massive attack from far. With this, his plan was now, it wasn't in ruins, but all he'd prepared for threatened to be undone. All because that idiot Mahito couldn't do as he was told and keep his bloody vow. Mastering his rising ire, he mustered a smile and turned to face the curse. Come, he must be calm. His temper wouldn't serve him here. He had no desire to kill this one, certainly not if he had somehow managed to consume Mahito's technique. It was unlikely, of course, a 1 in a million chance, but even then if he played his cards right, he might gain a powerful pawn in the future. Stronger than Mahito, easier to control, and more amenable to reason, or so he hoped. He would need to be terribly careful about that whole promise aspect of his. It had the potential to backfire spectacularly if he wasn't careful. But what was life without a little risk? Well, that was bracing. He stood his ground as the reborn blonde disaster stared at him. I believe we got off on the wrong foot back there. Might I have a moment of your time? All or nothing. He'd played his final card. This was the moment. Would they fight to the death or would they converse? A slow blink was his reward. Do you like ramen? Kenjaku blinked. He blinked hard. No. Naruto vanished in the blink of an eye. Kenjaku heaved a sigh. Unfortunate. Kokichi Muta hadn't expected to open his eyes. In truth, he'd been prepared to die. How unexpected. Yet in opening them he immediately wished he hadn't, because the first thing he saw was that cursed spirit from before crouched over him, staring at him with its otherworldly red eyes glowing in the gloom. He knew it had healed him properly, if not necessarily why. Something about a promise of some sort. It had even spirited him away, again, for reasons he couldn't comprehend. Was it going to attack him now? He didn't have the energy to move, let alone defend himself. Mahito might have granted him a new body, treacherous bastard, breaking his vow, but the fact remained that he'd come perilously close to death back there thanks to his half-hearted efforts. That they had been healed didn't matter, his body was still recovering, and while he'd retained his vast resources and cursed energy left behind, physically, he remained spent. He could barely lift a finger at the moment, and they both knew it. Where am I? Safe, came the brusque reply. Does it matter? I suppose not. He sighed. What happened to the curse who healed me? Is he dead? It wasn't a question but a statement of fact, for those red eyes did not waver. I killed him. That got an impressed blink from Kokichi. And his companion, what about him? Did you kill Suguru Gito? No, again with the clipped response. I was tired. Kokichi slumped into the floor. Well, one was better than none, he supposed. Did that mean he'd exhausted most of his energy killing Mahito, or was he simply weary from sleeping for so long it felt like he was missing a vital piece of the puzzle here? But try as he might, he couldn't figure it out. No, that wasn't important right now. Memory crashed down, swamping his thoughts. Satoru Gojo, Shibuya, the ceiling, all in 10 days' time. He struggled to rise and succeeded only in flopping about like a fish. I have to warn them. Whiskered cheeks dimpled in the beginnings of a frown. Why? He glared at the cursed spirit. Because they're my friends. A pause followed. An ember of light came back to those dull red eyes. Will you keep your promise to them? Of course I will. He mustered up enough strength to glare at the curse. Even if Miwa hates me for it, you love her. Also not a question. Kokichi groaned into the ground. Why am I even telling you this? In that case, I've just one question for you. A hand gripped his head, forcing him to look up at him. Do you like ramen? Kokichi managed a baffled blink. Yes, I've always wanted to try it. Naruto smiled. Good. Jogo sputtered incoherently. Mahito was killed. Hanami heaved a sigh. Unfortunate. He had such potential. Dagon burbled sadly, the little cursed womb unable to express himself with words. Kenjaku narrowly resisted the urge to throttle the lot of them. Useless, each and every one. Did they not understand how pivotal Mahito was to his plans? No, of course they didn't. All the disaster curses cared about was the death of their so-called friend and the void left behind by his absence. Oh, boo, as if anyone could be friends with that psychopathic child. Honestly, their sentiments sickened him. They were worse than humans. He watched them fuss and fret and nearly vomited. Yes, he too was a curse, but he at least held himself to a certain standards. He did things because they were interesting. He made plans and enacted them with a will, while that vicious brat had done whatever he pleased, whenever he pleased. However he pleased. He'd spent lifetimes working toward this moment, and now it all balanced on a knife's edge. All because the little fool couldn't do as he was told and keep a simple binding vow. Instead, his petty act of spite had wrought hell upon them and released something even worse than Sukuna, an ancient cursed spirit of vows. His strength wasn't a problem, it was his innate nature. Not only did he seem to be good in as much as a cursed spirit could be, but that aspect of vows and oaths promised to be a problem down the line. That implied he had morals, which meant he wouldn't easily be swayed to their side. If someone were to enter into a binding vow with such a being, he could gain great power. That curse had even unleashed a black flash there at the end. Did they have any idea how rare it was for a curse, even an ancient, to accomplish that? Now his precious culling game might never take place, or if it did, it might be radically different. He would have to adjust. And Gito, Jogo rumbled, accidentally drawing his ire. Who killed him? Was it Gojo? Satoru? Blast, the unlikely trio was looking to him for answers, and he must give them. Clearly, they'd expected something when Gito called them together. He could tell they were unsettled by Mahito's death. More than that, they wanted revenge. One look was all it took. They would have it, by hook or crook. I'm afraid not. So he plastered a smile across face, a smile he didn't feel, and forced himself to address them. It was another cursed spirit. They devoured him. He may have consumed his technique as well. Hanami growled. Do we know where he is? If only if he knew where Naruto was hiding, he wouldn't be here. Unfortunately not. He's laying low at the moment. There's no sign of his residuals. Kenjaku couldn't remember the last time he'd been this baffled. His grand plan would never work. No. He must adjust. But how to go about it? No, wait. An idea dawned. Find him. Our plan may well hinge on it. 7 days. It took Kokichi Muta an entire week to fully recover, even with healing from the ghastly horrors Mahito inflicted upon his new body. It wasn't just his lungs that had been tampered with, you see, but his throat as well. The vicious curse had been determined to inflict as much pain as possible. At such a time it was difficult to speak for a time, let alone breathe. He didn't regain the ability to speak without pain until the 6th day. Not to say he was idle until then, of course, he wasn't. He'd grown accustomed to being stuck in one place after all, and while his physical form might be on the mend, his mind was not. Wounded though he was, he still had his vast resources and all the puppets he'd created at his disposal. Moreover, he still had ultimate Mechamaru, mode absolute to utilize, and 17 years worth of stored cursed energy to burn. Those would come in handy later, as would the small army he'd assembled. One of said puppets had been discreetly dispatched to warn Gojo Satoru of Sugiuru's Shibuya scheme only yesterday and to admit his part in said scheme. Gojo had torn that Mechamaru to pieces. He should have known the name Gito would set him right off. But anger or no, he'd done his duty. The strongest sorcerer had been warned. Now he needed to recover, which meant sleep. Naruto kept an eye on him the entire time, nursing him back to health and refusing to let him do anything even remotely strenuous until he recovered. The blonde's haven proved little more than a cavern carved into a mountain, something he must have stumbled upon by sheer chance. He never left it, never gave up his vigil, but copies of him did. A cursed technique, it seemed useful. Each came back with food ramen, of all things admittedly lukewarm, but he appreciated the sentiment almost as much as the blankets they brought. As per their vow, he fed and cared for him without fail, without complaint, with barely even a word. Until on the 7th day, 3 days before the Shibuya incident, Kokichi Muta awoke. To find his savior, captor, possible enemy, wasn't sure. Talking to himself, I am a curse, I am a curse, I think, therefore I am. I'm still me, so I have to keep my promise, it's what he would have done. Reciting the words brought Naruto some small meager measure of comfort, albeit not much. What would he do now? It was that very question that tormented him so. The indecision, not knowing what came next, and the bitter realization that, for better or worse, the world had changed while he was asleep. The world of the shinobi was truly dead and gone. It had given way to that of the jujutsu sorcerer and cursed spirits, of tall towering metal buildings and strange metal boxes that drove people around. Still, there was a silver lining in all this. He'd kept his promise. Mahito was dead and gone, that dirty promise breaker, and he was never coming back. Some small semblance of his power lingered within him for now, but it would probably fade in a few hundred years, just like most of the Otsutsuki powers he'd gained. Idle transfiguration was it. He frowned and focused upon one finger of his right hand, trying to harness the newfound power nestle within him. That twisted curse had shifted his shape so easily during their battle. Surely it couldn't be that hard. He need only focus there for a fleeting moment. He managed to turn his finger into a serrated blade. Shocked by the shift, he let go and his soul snapped back into its natural shape. Well, he'd learn to use it eventually. A gift like this was wasted on a wretched worm like Mahito. Something stirred in him. If I had this back then, I could have saved everyone. He choked on his anger, that foul fire flickering deep within his chest, and forced it down. Who are you talking to, cursed spirit? Naruto's head snapped up. Who are you talking to, cursed spirit? Kokichi Muta immediately regretted speaking the words as soon as he said them, because Naruto absolutely rounded on him. For a moment he thought the blonde might actually attack him, such was the ire in his eyes. He didn't dare move beneath such a gaze. His aura was different than that of Satoru Gojo, a peerless, powerful presence that promised pain for all those who pissed him off. There was a pause as the blonde blinked at him. Myself, he said at last. I was thinking of the past. His tight-lipped expression said it all. Kokichi knew better than to pry. He sought another avenue of attack instead. Are you truly certain that curse is dead? It wasn't the first time he'd asked, and it likely wouldn't be the last. Mahito's specter haunted him still. In many ways the cursed spirit had left his mark upon him. He would never truly forget that awful smile until the day he died. Alwa, you do care. Ice shot down Mechamaru's spine. Calm down, he reassured himself. It's nothing. He has no presence within you. No residuals, no nothing. You checked. Remember, you're imagining things. There was no response. Yes, he must have imagined it. That, or the sheer stress he'd suffered, was causing him to hear voices. Mildly worrying. That maybe he should see Miss Shoko and get it checked out. Lopped off his limbs, cut him in half and ate his soul. Naruto was saying as he came back to himself. Come to think of it, I was cut in half once, too, and that didn't kill me. Those soulful red eyes squinted at him in quiet concern. Can people survive without their souls? Kokichi heaved a rueful sigh. People operate on a different level than curses. Naruto blinked again. They do, don't they? I'm sorry. I forgot. For some reason, the admission seemed to sadden him. Still, you seem better now. Your voice has returned to. He shook his head and walked away, mumbling to himself. Something clenched in Kokichi's chest. It felt like fear. Where are you going? Where the blonde curse paused and peered over his shoulder. I honored my vow. You're fully healed, and as such, I no longer have a purpose here. I've done what I promised. He turned to leave again. Keep your word and we won't have any problems. Wait, he stumbled to his feet. What will you do now? I don't know. An idea dawned. Then you lack a purpose. Another pause. My purpose is promises. That's all I need. Then make one with me. He held out his hand. Another binding vow, just like before. Naruto's right ear twitched, crimson cloak swaying, just so. He has his attention. Good, what kind of vow? The kind that will forever give you a purpose. Judging by the blonde's tilting head, he had his curiosity, if not his attention. Swear to fight for what's right, for the good in the world. And there is good at the blonde's sour smile. He was quick to reassure him. Jujutsu sorcerers fight against it every day. If you so swear, then my life is yours in perpetuity. That's not a vow made lightly. It was not, but there was no hesitation in him. The Jujutsu sorcerers needed this man on their side. If he joined their enemies, they'd be wiped out. He just knew it. I was weak. He glared down at the stone floor, hands balling into fists at his sides at the reminder. And in my weakness, I failed to trust my friends. It nearly cost me my life. Never again. His jaw clenched, teeth gnashing against one another. I'll spend the rest of my life atoning for that mistake. You remind me of someone. Mechamaru's head snapped up. I do who? The son I once had. Naruto regarded him with a small smile. A boy I adopted. His name was Kawaki. He was willing to do anything for those he loved, too. Kakichi made a gamble then. Some might say it was foolish to place your trust in a cursed spirit. No, it undoubtedly was. Cursed spirits were often fickle, and even when they weren't, they often viewed the world through a singular focus, discarding all else. But what other choice did he have? Naruto could tear him limb from limb and would, if it came to a fight. They needed him on their side. I'll be your new son. He flung himself down on his knees and bowed his head low, forehead kissing the cold stones. Just please, protect my friends. To do, at least, could probably fend for himself, but he was terrified for Miwa and the others. They weren't weak, but neither were they strong enough to weather the storm that was coming. I beg of you. Naruto blinked at him, the most surprised he'd ever seen, really. Then he chuckled. It was a hoarse, rusty sound, one he clearly hadn't used in centuries. But he didn't speak. Not at first. Raise your head. A bead of sweat ran down Kakichi's brow as he stared at the floor. He could feel his heart pounding in his ears, drowning out the world around him. Thump, thump, thump. Was this the moment he died? He could feel the tension in the air bearing down on him, an awful pressure that promised pain if he didn't speak true. Reluctantly, he did as he was bade and raised his head. Naruto's face was less than an inch from his own, slitted red eyes searing into him with the heat of 1,000 suns. Kakichi nearly fainted dead away, such was the intensity of that fearsome expression. A hand swept out, clawed fingers reaching for his face with infinite slowness. This was it, then. Death. He tried so hard and got so far. That hand came down on his head and ruffled his hair. I acknowledge your binding vow. Breath rushed out of the young sorcerer in an explosive sigh. Relief now. He nearly fainted for a different reason. I still don't fully understand this jujutsu world of yours, Naruto rumbled, but don't worry, you and yours are under my protection now. A thought struck him, an ugly worm burrowing through the walls of his heart. I did betray my friends, even if it was to protect them. The higher-ups will take issue with that. No, Naruto declared the word with the utter surety of a leader, the sternness of a man who once commanded legions of trained killers while he was alive. You're under my protection now. If you superiors try to take you, I'll end them. Maybe I'll find purpose in that. A beat of silence passed between them. Finally, the glowing blonde's stern facade cracked a little. Heh. He leaned back with a wry chuckle, palming his face. I sounded like the old Gaara for a second there. Gaara, a good friend, long dead with the rest. He sat down beside him, face closing down again. My friends and family would have liked you, I think. You've got spirit. Dare he push his luck? This curse was his best bet for preventing the upcoming horror in Shibuya, quite possibly the key to his survival. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. You know what it is to live with regret. He stared down at his hand, idly marveling at how easily it moved. Whatever Naruto had done to him left him feeling strong, powerful in a way he hadn't been before. It bolstered his confidence, if only a little. If you've hit rock bottom, then you have nowhere to go but up. And if your family is long gone, then start a new one. Crunch. A fist lanced out, pulverizing the floor. Naruto took a deep breath and let it go, teeth bared in a snarl. It's not that simple. Surely you can. You don't understand. The pain in his voice was dull, an old wound that hadn't healed right even after centuries in isolation. I loved him. His fingers curled into a fist, biting down with such force that his palm bled. I don't think I'll ever love anyone quite like I did my family. Fair. But he couldn't bear to let him sink into despair. You don't have to start with love. That comes slowly, as his head with Miwa. Or suddenly, the blonde muttered sullenly. He looked like he was recalling some deeply personal memory. Then he looked up. Where is this Miwa girl of yours? Muta's face went red. She's not mine. Then make her yours. He rasped. Tell her how you feel before someone stabs her in front of you. Spoken from experience, he winced almost immediately, cursing himself for the momentary lapse. Apologies. I didn't mean. No, it's fine. Naruto waved him down with a weary sigh. She survived that time. Not what came after. He winced. May I ask how she? They beheaded her. Muta gagged. Tell her. Naruto stared at him. It was practically a plea. Before you lose her like I lost my family. What could he say to that? He couldn't even imagine what that must be like. No, he didn't want to. It would be akin to finally finding happiness with Miwa, her reciprocating his feelings, settling down with her, raising a family of their own, only for a curse to suddenly rip all that away in an instant. He couldn't imagine the pain. Merely thinking about it was enough to shut his brain down. Small wonder this man had become a special grade curse. If it were him, he wouldn't rest until Miwa's killers were scattered across all of Japan. I'll tell her. Good boy. Naruto patted his head with a sad, fatherly smile. Trust me, it's better this way, better to tell her before she tells you. Maybe. She might not even feel the same way, but that was fine. so long as she was happy. Her happiness was his happiness. Their sanctuary trembled overhead. Dust rained down upon them. Naruto looked up. Huh, seems they found us. Time to go. Takechi tensed. What will you do now? Take you to her? Probably. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment, frowned. Then I'll deal with them. She's the one with the sword, right? Yes, Mechamaru frowned, but why no? Wait, I don't need. Naruto grabbed him. The world blurred. Miwa yelped as the ceiling above her imploded and a blonde curse dropped a sullen boy in her lap. Hot tea went flying everywhere as she cried out. What else could she do? She'd been enjoying a simple cup of said tea aboard the train as she fretted over Mechamaru's unexplained absence. No one was telling her anything, but she knew. She'd known for days now. Everyone thought she was useless. Miwa, they really didn't, but she wasn't stupid. Stressed, but not stupid. Hence the tea. It really was a very nice cup, just the sort to ease her worries away as they returned to Kyoto from a log mission. Right up until this happened. She couldn't think, she couldn't blink, she could barely even breathe. Those wild red eyes glared down at her and she felt small. Are you Kasumi, Miwa? Why yes. Good. He patted the head of the baffling boy still planted in her lap. He kept his promise. Be good to him. To CH, said boy groused. I said I didn't need your help. Still getting it. The blonde curse flounced away. Meddling bastard. That voice. Wait, are you Mechamaru? The blonde curse didn't answer, but the sullen grunt her guest made was answer enough. You didn't really betray us, did you? The young man tumbled off her lap and landed in the seat beside her. I'm afraid I did. Something lodged in Miwa's throat. It's not about that anymore. He clasped his hands and refused to look at her. It was my, Kamo, Nishimiya and Yutaheim, too. Why didn't you talk to me about it? Why didn't you ask for help? Aren't we friends? Her shoulders hunched inward. Is it because I'm weak? No, I'm the one who was weak. He palmed his face with a sigh, covering his eyes. Because I was weak, I made a mistake. And I couldn't even see that mistake through because of my own inherent weakness. Daring to peek through his fingers, he barreled on. There was this girl I loved. Something lurched in her chest when he said the words. And I didn't care what happened to the world so long as I could be at her side and protect her. Even if that girl didn't want me to be the one to protect her, I wanted her to find happiness. Whatever shape it took, as long as she was happy, that was enough for me. And tears stung at her eyes, a sob strangling her words. Miwa buried her head in his chest. You big dummy. Jogo did not expect him to return. In truth, it came as a surprise. He'd thought that this vow-cursed spirit would flee in return. Yet here he was, stood before him, Hanami and Dagon, glaring balefully at the ruin that was once his home. That was a nice cave, he muttered mournfully, words echoing in the gloom. I liked that cave. I had ramen in that cave. Ramen, what was ramen? It didn't matter. Breath. He thrust a finger at him. You will come with us. Hanami hissed out a startled breath. Jogo. Well, why was she concerned? Why? Why did his arm hurt? Baffled, he looked to it, only to find himself staring at a ruined bloody stump, dripping viscous violet blood. Naruto was clutching the rest of it in his right hand. You ruined my meal, he hissed. It's only fair that you repay me in kind. I didn't see it. His single eye widened as horror dawned with him. No, I couldn't see him move, didn't even feel the pain until it was done. As he looked on, the blonde took a great big bite out of it and ate the arm, fingers, and all. He devoured the damn thing like five-star cuisine, wiped the purple stain off his mouth with a tattered sleeve, then stepped forward. Somewhere between step 1 and 2, Jogo lost track of him. Just like that, he found him stood between the three of them. This one-thigh's one's just as violent as Sukunano. Wait, he might actually be worse. He was still processing that thought when clenched knuckles barreled into his face. Pain was the reward for his epiphany and all hell broke loose. It was 3 against 1. They held the advantage in every way. Each of them were fresh and they all possessed their own domains. So how were they being overpowered? Jogo struck down with a yowl, only for a fist to crash headlong into his eye, stunning him. In the same instant, his attacker, the blonde curse, whirled, caught Hanami's hand and whipped her into Dagon, sending his fellow disasters sprawling. All this in the blink of an eye. He didn't even have time to recover before the blonde rounded on him, his eyes stark slits of savage scarlet. There was no time to think, much less defend himself. An open palm blasted into his gut and blasted him backwards, simultaneously sending the fiery curse flying, hollering at the top of his lungs as his body accelerated to near terminal velocity. Momentum melded him with a mountain and the mountain erupted overhead, such was the force of his impact. It suited his mood perfectly. He was seething, furious, absolutely livid. Not even Gojo Satoru had made him this angry. Damn brat. His body burst upward with a roar, dragging all that magma and lava with him to form a pair of giant hands. Hanami and Dagon realized what he was about to do and leapt clear, well that they did at that, because Jogo brought those massive flaming palms them down on the blonde curse a moment later, swamping him on either side, flooding the once there. No way he could survive something like that. Even Sukuna would have been hard-pressed against something like that. A flicker of motion in his peripherals was his only warning before a hand closed around his face and whipped him down into the lava. Jogo didn't even have time to right himself. A golden meteor in human form crashed down on him from on high and a bare foot burst through his torso, the sheer shockwave of which evaporated his lava into so much steam. Red eyes leered down at him, set within a shadowy face framed by a stern scowl. He flung up a hand to defend himself and his attacker tore it clean off with their teeth. His bloodshot eye bulged as pain shattered his defenses. Then the beating began. Left, right, left again, now. 3 vicious blows rained down on Jogo before Hanami and Dagon managed to interfere. Even then a contemptuous kick set him spinning away from his allies. I understand now. He reeled to his feet in the rubble, clutching his broken jaw in one hand, dark purple blood sluicing between his trembling fingers. This is how he killed Mahito. This monster doesn't care about pain or any injuries he takes. If he has any special techniques, he isn't using them. It's just strength, pure, overwhelming strength. Naruto's gaze flicked left then right, followed by up, now down, tracking each attack as he deflected them all, each in the time it would take a human to breathe. Hanami screamed in utter agony, snapping Jogo back to reality just in time to see his earthen ally topple back, missing most of her shoulder and her left leg besides. Dagon burbled pitifully as a kick catapulted him away a heartbeat later to join her. None of that mattered now, however, because he'd just lost track of the blonde curse again and Oder Gotzentegane. Move. He had to move. Hurry up and move before. Something spun him right round and seized his throat. Terrifying red eyes filled his vision, drilling into him. Did you keep your promise? Jogo gurgled wetly, clutching at the hand biting into his windpipe to no avail. What do you care so much about promises? 4 crimson tails stabbed into him, skewering each limb through, preventing him from moving. All the while those searing scarlet eyes glared at him, colder than the king of curses himself. Jogo suffered another epiphany just then and dearly wished he hadn't. Sukuna cared for little, but this one was the opposite of him. He cared too much. That made him volatile, dangerous, and there was nothing more dangerous than rage. You don't, do you? Those cruel, clawed fingers tightened around his throat. In that case, a jet of pressured water slammed into Naruto's back, staggering him. Jogo peered over his shoulder, searching for his unlikely savior. Dagon raised a trembling limb. How dare you hurt Jogo? It was the wrong thing to say. Jogo did not know Uzumaki Naruto. He had no idea who he was or what he'd been through, let alone the circumstances that had broke him so badly. But somehow, someway, he knew in that moment, that was the worst thing the little cursed womb could have said. For an awful moment the world itself seemed to hold its breath. And then, Naruto absolutely twitched, all 9 tails of him. How dare I? The whites of his red eyes bled black. How dare I? Jogo found himself cast aside like yesterday's trash. Naruto streaked toward Dagon with a vengeance. The little curse stood its ground. Jogo cried out, Dagon, no. His comrade might be on the brink of evolution, but he had not yet completed that evolution, nor had he evolved. Unlike him and Hanami, their fellow disaster curse was still merely a cursed womb. Strong, yes, furious, undoubtedly, but not enough. They both knew he was of little help as he was now. He could only provide support via bursts of water, and those were summarily slapped aside by Naruto with all the contempt they deserved. The blonde curse-caught dragon grabbed him by the face and slammed the smaller curse down into the mud. Where was my help when my family faced the slaughter? His teeth flashed in a furious snarl as he wedged him deeper. When the Otsutsuki attacked, nobody came yet. Whenever I try to kill one of you, the other 2 move heaven and earth to save each other. Why not them? Jogo conjured a sphere of flame to his hand and hesitated. Damn it all, he couldn't attack without killing his friend. Dagon's body writhed and twisted beneath Naruto's heel, gaining muscle and mass. The main expansion horizon of the captivating Skanda. The change was instantaneous. Their shattered and scarred surroundings vanished in a rush of cursed energy and were summarily replaced by a sunny tropical beach surrounded by an endless blue ocean on all sides. He knew this place, was familiar with this place, had dwelt here many a time before. Naruto had not. He frowned, confused for just a moment. That confusion cost him most dear. Oh, yes, most dearly indeed. He'd only just begun to frown when a swarm of savage fish slammed into him from every conceivable angle, each sinking their teeth into him, head, shoulders, knees, even his chest and toes. His body vanished, lost from sight beneath the death swarm of devouring Shikigami. For the first time since the battle had begun, Jogo felt a faint flickering ember of hope. He surged forward, intent on rescuing his diminutive comrade where he lay in the sands. Not for long. Surely that would make him move and get off Dagon. 9 crimson tails flashed outward, dismembering the swarm of fish. In his haste to save his comrade, Jogo ran right into them and lost both his legs. He'd only just begun to regenerate them when a vicious stomp caved in Dagon's skull. The domain shattered around them. Did you think I would let you use that? Naruto snarled down at him, uncaring of his already mending wounds. The world doesn't work that way. An enemy doesn't wait for you to get a convenient power-up. They don't show mercy, and they don't hesitate. Let's see how you like losing someone you hold dear. His hands swept forward. Boy, Hanami shouted behind him as she flung a spike of hardened roots his way. Look over here. Naruto did no such thing. He'd already chosen his victim and made no effort to escape or otherwise evade her oncoming attack. She skewered him with roots, lungs, pancreas, liver. His body convulsed every so briefly, an annoyed grunt tearing its way past his lips. A thin line of black blood ran down his chin, dribbling wetly upon the ground. Even then he didn't falter. Not for a moment. A bloodshot red eye rolled back to glare at her. Wait your turn, weed. Hanami rushed him. Jogo knew she wouldn't make it in time. Not nearly in time. Quick as a flash, Naruto brought both palms together, conjuring a rush of hideous black light between his fingers. It swelled to inhumane size, practically flattening Dagon beneath it. The watery curse groaned piteously and struggled to crawl away, to no avail. Naruto still had him pinned beneath his foot. His mouth split in a feral smile, face stretching within the hellish radiance he was about to unleash. I was going to say something witty and cutting and brutal before I finished you off. Without warning, the sphere condensed itself to size of a small marble. But fuck it, there was light. Jogo flung up an arm to shield his eye against it, and even then he went blind for a brief moment. Such was the sheer supernova that went up between them. He found himself blasted backward from the sheer shockwave alone, and Hanami with him. When the smoke cleared and the dust settled, he saw the horror that had been wrought. Dagon, what was left of him, was crumbling away, dissolving into so much black smoke. Naruto hoisted up the remains of their comrade's head and bit down on it, tearing his skull clear off with cursed energy. He'd done the same to Mahito, though they'd never seen it. But witnessing such a depraved act now, Jogo felt something close in his throat. Cursed spirits could kill one another. It was rare, but so long as the kill was made with cursed energy, they could be exorcised, even by each other. Dagon was gone. Dagon was dead. Dagon washed just been killed just like. Hanami charged in with a mournful yell. Domain expansion. Hanami, no, don't get close to him. Too late. Naruto didn't even deign to look Hanami's way. He disemboweled her with a casual backhand, nearly tearing her in half on the spot. Her domain shattered like so much glass around her, barely glimpsed for even a moment before her body struck the dirt. Jogo lurched upward with a snarl, hands crossed. Domain. Twin hands closed down on either side of his face. His cursed energy guttered out like candle. I know that feeling. Searing scarlet eyes gazed down at him, stopping him cold. That hate. His fellow curse leaned closer, regarding him intently. That unendurable need for retribution. Because you see, I've lost people I love too. Just as much as you love these two. But the three of you started this. His head turned, regarding Dagon's ashes, and Hanami's still twitching body, stubbornly clinging to the last dregs of life. But for how much longer, he knew not. So you had to pay. You'll understand someday. Jogo tried to say something, anything at all, but words failed him. He could even bring himself to open his domain. Naruto seemed to understand that. Oh, I could kill you, and I will, but not today. The ancient curse let him go and vanished in a flash of crimson light. Jogo sank down to his knees. His lone eye glistened with tears. What was this feeling trapped in his chest? It almost felt like. His head snapped back and a mournful cry filled the night. Naruto's return proved about as abrupt as it was startling. Kakichi damn near fell out of his seat already. The blonde curse granted him a slow nod. Miwa proved far more vocal from her perch in his lap. It's barely been half an hour. Did you run away from them or? A slow shake of his head. Right. He'd forgotten Naruto wasn't the sort to talk unless agitated or otherwise pressed. Come, they were allies. There was no need for anger here. Could you please explain? All right. That got a reaction out of him, however muted it might be. Killed and ate the water one, left the wheat on death's door, and doused the third's fire. He counted each off on the fingers of his right hand with slow and steady precision, even if he rattled the words off flatly. Wasn't hard. Oh, a voice sing-song just behind them. Sounds interesting, do go on. Kakichi jolted in his seat, alarmed to find Satoru Gojo of all people leaning over them. The man's smile looked uncharacteristically sharp. The sight of it left his throat terribly, horribly dry. Had he teleported into the room, certainly he could do that, but he hadn't even sensed him. He hadn't been there a second ago, when had he? How did Yaoi are you? It's no secret that you're fond of Miss Miwa over here. The strongest jujutsu sorcerer beamed down at him. I had a hunch, so I decided to lurk a little bit. And surprise, surprise, he waved his jazzy hands in the air. My hunch paid off, and besides, the train car has a big hole in the roof, Suo. Miwa blanched. Were y'all stalking me? Now, don't say it like that. You'll make me sound like the bad guy, but who's this? He'd been so focused on her that he'd almost forgotten the two titans in the room with them. The world held its breath. Miwa fidgeted in his lap, already nervous, but her anxiety paled to Kakichi's own. In all his plans and calculations, he'd never once accounted for Uzumaki or Satoru meeting one another, least of all in an enclosed space such as this. Sparks flashed between Naruto and Gojo. Neither budged. You almost look human, the latter hummed. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were one of us. Naruto panicked. Don't attack him, he's a special grade curse. Special grade? Hey, Gojo stared at him for a long moment. Slowly, he peeled back his blindfold, exposing a bright blue eye. Friend or foe? Neither. A yawn answered him. I'm sleepy. You haven't broken any promises. Not fighting you. His enthusiasm dimmed. He wasn't going to fight, really. You're a bit odd. Just what kind of curse are you? Another yawn. The kind that keeps his promises. Can I go now? So they weren't going to fight. Neat. Kakichi Muda relayed everything he knew. It was the only thing he could think to do that might keep the peace. Maybe. Just maybe. Well, that's annoying. By the end of it, Satoru didn't seem all that fazed. Hey, don't worry. Whatever plan they have, I'm still the strongest. And your friend here. Kakichi faltered for a moment but rallied. From what I understand, he's essentially a spirit of vows. Vows? Hey, Satoru stroked his chin, considering. Like what? Promises. Came the clarification. And you do realize the higher-ups aren't going to be happy about this. As if he weren't already aware of that. I would offer my head as recompense, but Oh, I see. The strongest sorcerer hummed. You made a binding vow with this guy, didn't you? A nod. What else could he say? He's promised to fight on our side for now. You didn't see what I saw. They butchered Mahito like it was nothing. It wasn't even a challenge for him. And if his claims about killing another is true, well, that's a bit of a problem. He scratched at the back of his head with a merry laugh. Can't say I've ever worked with a cursed spirit before, let alone a special grade. Something hard passed through his eyes just then, lending him a decidedly wicked look. I wonder how strong he is. Naruto tensed. Gojo-sensei, no. Awa, is he your pal? Miwa glared at him intently. Satoru shrugged. First time for everything. You lovebirds have fun. I want to have some words with our friend here. Naruto didn't know what to make of Gojo Satoru. They say first impressions last a lifetime. This certainly would. Not only was the man strange and eccentric, he was just downright odd. On a whim, he'd let the man wrangle him back toward one of the empty train cars to give Kikichi and Miwa their privacy. He didn't sense any ill intent, but he'd found himself fielding questions ever since. Satoru wasn't mean or anything, he was just carefree, exceptionally so. He moved and spoke with the surety of someone strong. Because he was. Here was someone who had grown inordinately powerful, someone who didn't let life get him down, and did as he damn well pleased. It reminded him of simpler times, happier times. And if it had him lowering his guard a little, well, he did, just a bit. Naruto, right? Satoru slung an arm around his shoulder. Can I call you Naruto? Sure, I guess. It was, very much so, the right thing to say. Great. Gojo clapped him on the back. I want to introduce you to somebody, a student of mine, you could say. Behold, Itadori Yuji, I present to you Uzumaki Naruto. Satoru. Gojo swept his arms wide and stepped aside, revealing Naruto in all his glory. The latter dared a tentative wave. Wow, he wasn't kidding. These kids of his really are an eclectic bunch. One of them, a bright boy with salmon-colored hair, darted forward despite his two teammates' utterly baffled looks. Wait, like the Rasengan guy, he's real. Naruto absolutely twitched. Rasengan guy. He'd followed Satoru on a whim to see what all the hubbub was about, but never in all his years had he expected such a ridiculous nickname. Rasengan guy, really the gall. He would have preferred something cooler, like the Prince of Pranks, the Hokage, or literally anything else. Be nice. Satoru delivered a stern chop to the boy's head. He came all this way to see you at my request. The least you could do is humor him. Itadori rounded on him, balking. But he's in a manga, how's he real? The world fizzled. Naruto blinked anew. Manga. The lone girl in the group growled. This some kind of joke. The last of them, a boy with black spiky hair, merely tilted his head. Satoru tugged at his blindfold with a rueful sigh. Okay, lot to unpack there. An absurdly detailed explanation followed on Gojo's part, summarized by the presentation of a hefty tome that, wonder of wonders, actually had pictures of him in it. A series called Naruto and another known only as Boruto. He thumbed through the pages a bit numbly, surprised to recognize scenes of his life within. Not all of them were exact, of course, but they were close and they were familiar, and that was enough to throw him off his game. How should he feel about this? By the log, he didn't know how to feel. This is based on me. Kinda. Gojo waffled a hand. Pretty sure not everything in there is accurate, Suo. It isn't. He tossed the books back to him, unable to contain his disbelief. Legends of me are greatly exaggerated. Someone must have survived way back in his day and passed the stories of his exploits on, else this manga of him wouldn't exist. Yet it did. And wasn't that an enigma? Had time softened his story, he didn't remember half of this crap. There was no happy ending, despite what this thing says. He stared at him. I died and came back as thighs. A hand waved down on his shimmering scarlet form, the flames idly flickering even now. I killed my enemies and kept killing until there were none left. But you won, right? Itadori looked up at him earnestly. Sweet, naive child. If you can call scorched earth a victory. Oi, sensei. The Asafit unnamed girl interjected. Why the hell haven't we exorcised this thing? He's a curse, isn't he? Now, Gojo crooned, he may be a curse, but there's good in him, even if just a little. Just think about it, a regular curse could probably have killed you already. Damn it, sensei, don't say that. I mean really, he could. Can't hear you. Naruto shook his head and tuned them out. He didn't really understand why Gojo brought him here, but it was better than wandering aimlessly. He'd be doing that again soon enough. Besides, these kids were nice enough, in their own way. They reminded him of Team 7. Megumi was the sullen, sulky Sasuke, Nobara the stubborn Sakura, and Itadori. By the sage, he felt so nostalgic. Gojo nudged him. You all right there? And why wouldn't I be? You're crying. A lone tear had rolled down his cheek. He thumbed it away with a grunt. I'm fine. You just remind me of some old friends. Itadori caught on quickly. Who do I remind you of? Me. So much so that it made him ache and his smile crack a little. We've got someone like Sasuke here, he pointed to Megumi. Huh, Sakura over there. She sputtered. Me, you gotta be kidding. And Kakashi right there. He finished, pointing to Gojo. He has the eyes, the blindfold, the hair and everything. Huh, that actually fits. Nobara huffed. Are we seriously playing to his delusions? Come on, what's the harm? Naruto let their words wash over them and closed his eyes, suppressing a rueful chuckle. He wasn't afraid, hadn't been afraid in a very long time, but seeing the four of them like this made him feel almost like. Why did his eyes hurt so damn much? Oh, he realized it now. He was crying again. Damn it. Yuji blanched, looking worried not for himself, but his own sake. Are you all right? A small, bitter laugh tumbled out of him. No, I'm not, and that's all right. He was beginning to realize that. His purpose was vows, promises as he interpreted them. And he had sworn to uphold good, hadn't he? He didn't want these kids to die, let alone suffer. They deserved all the happiness and goodness in life. His inner parent cried out, I wanna adopt him so damn bad. Why did you bring me here anyway? He coughed into a fist to hide his embarrassment. Surely not to show me off to these kids. The girl squawked. Boy, had he said something wrong there. I'm sorry, he rasped. That wasn't an insult. Sure sounded like one. But it wasn't. Feisty like Sakura this one, but also more honest with herself, somehow. You're all young compared to me. Nobara hefted her hammer. Kyujisaki, no. Gojo grabbed her from behind, grinning playfully. Bad. Nobara, sit in the corner and think about what you've done. Naruto blinked. So her last name's Kyujisaki. It almost sounds like Kusagaki. Nobara lunged at him again. He's dead. Gojo clamped a hand over her mouth. Have mercy, he has no filter. Itadori, however, needed no such prodding. He looked at him for a long moment and offered his hand. Wanna be friends? Naruto faltered. I don't suppose you have a father, do you? Yuji tilted his head. No. Naruto blinked. Once, twice now, thrice for good measure. Well, that made things simple, didn't it? He flung his arms around this little beacon of sunshine. My son. Yuji flailed helplessly. Hey, wait. He sensed a presence, not something within Nobara and Megumi, or even Gojo, but Yuji. It was right there, roiling under his skin. Something dark, something deadly, like staring into the abyss, only for the darkness to grin back at him. A chill shot down his right arm, as though he dipped the limb into black sludge, and he shivered. Reluctantly, he released Itadori and stepped back. What is that? Oh, Gojo applauded him. So you noticed Sukuna. Sharp of you. Naruto's brow furrowed as he tried to speak the name and mangled it horribly. Saku. A mouth appeared on Itadori's cheek, grinning darkly. Aren't you a cheeky one? I'll be sure to kill you slowly. Sorry. Yuji clapped a hand over it. He does it sometimes. Naruto squinted. He really is just like me, isn't he? He's got a monster in him too. If Kurama were still alive, he suspected he would have taken offense to that. But there was only silence. Always silence. Endless, bitter silence. It made him want to act. No, he needed to act, needed to see who this Sukuna really was. Whatever you're thinking, Gojo chimed, I wouldn't do it. Thinking had never been his strong suit. Naruto stepped forward, pressed a hand against Itadori's chest, and the world twisted. In an instant the comforting hues of dappled sunlight and morning glories were gone, and he found himself standing in a realm of blood and bone. A hollow ribcage loomed overhead, casting all the world in shadow, spikes of dark death ready to fall down from on high and skewer him where he stood. And there, sitting atop a throne of bones, no, a mountain of skulls, clad in pale robes. Oh, a familiar voice filled the air with silken menace. I don't recall giving you permission to touch my soul, fool. Sukuna really did look like Yuji. At first glance one might be forgiven for thinking the two were one. But they would have been wrong. Oh, so very wrong. Wrong. It wasn't just his smile and his face, but his very voice, those eerie black markings across his face, and his very presence, the casual disregard for anything and everything as being beneath him. It all reminded him of an Otsutsuki. Sukuna wasn't one, of course, couldn't be, he'd already slaughtered all of those, but that arrogance, the insufferable smirk as he looked down on him from on high. It made him angry. Know your place. The air flickered as he crossed his fingers. Be gone. A riotous ripple rent the air. It was his one and only warning. Naruto's hand snapped out, slapping the slash aside. Oh, Sukuna lowered his hand. You can see my technique interesting. You may speak. I'll give you a finger's worth of time. Naruto planted his feet and narrowly choked down an insult. What are you doing inside this boy? Please, the king of curses scoffed. As if I chose to have him as a host. Not my fault the brat ate my damn finger. So he hadn't chosen him willingly. That was good, he wasn't sure. I don't suppose you'd leave if I asked you to. I could. He frowned. But will ya? Sukuna smirked. I would not. Damn tricky troll. I do as I please, when I please. The king of curses continued with a lazy drawl. If you want my attention, at least make it worthwhile. Then if I beat your ass, will you leave Yuji alone? Impossibly. That shite-eating grin grew ever wider. You can't beat me here, boy. Never say never. He'd beaten worse odds before. Maybe not, but I can make you bleed. Can you now? The king clicked his tongue. You'd be wise to leave while your soul is still in one piece. Maybe so, but he'd never been big on smart decisions. A wise man would have fled. Wisdom had never been his strong suit. Naruto marched up the throne of bones with a snarl, skulls crunching underfoot. Each step brought him closer to conflict. This wasn't a part of a vow. He'd made no such promise to fight this monster masquerading as a man. By rights, he didn't have to do this, but he didn't care. He had one thought, one objective, and to hell with all the rest. There were many fancy words one might use to describe what he felt in this moment. He chose 3. Kill, crush, annihilate. Oh, for some reason his expression made the king grin. You're still approaching me even after that warning. Naruto began to crack his knuckles, body burning a baleful red. I can't kick your ass without getting closer. Bold of you. In that case, Sukuna rose from his throne, grinning ear to ear. Get as close as you like. Naruto stomped forward and reared his arm back. Sukuna mirrored him with lazy contempt. His fist found the king's face in the same instant. Clenched knuckles barreled into his whiskered visage. Both monster and man reared back, each spitting blood. One smiled. The other scowled. It was war.